It's a cold, brisk morning in Arizona. The streets lay dormant, the pandemic casting a stark silence over the usual hustle and bustle of everyday life. Most are confined to working from home, desperate to achieve some resemblance of normality back into their lives. And if you look through her front window, you would suspect the same thing. A normal woman working a normal job from a normal laptop. However, looks can be deceiving, because little known to anyone else, behind that laptop lies a catalyst for destruction. A repeatable process for anonymous scammers to infiltrate the very infrastructure of the United States and fund North Korea's nuclear war effort. This ordinary woman, the key cog in the entire machine, not out of choice, but out of circumstance. An unfortunate puppet in a game with far higher stakes than anyone, even the FBI, could ever anticipate. This is the story of Christina Chapman, a woman who got into deep waters with the wrong people, being forced against her will to help North Korean scammers steal the identities of over 60 US citizens and generate over $17 million in the process. Now, to gain a true understanding of how Chapman's life took a sharp turn for the worse, we need to take a couple of steps back. Born in 1970 in Litchfield Park, Arizona, Chapman's childhood and early adult life were extremely ordinary. She went to school, she got a normal job, she worried about bills and money, but she always stayed on the right side of the law, never picking up a public criminal record, not even a driving offence. Now, when the pandemic came around in 2020, everyone's lives were shaken up. With so much free time, most people decided to try and improve their lives in some way, be it get it into running, learning a new skill, or reconnecting with old friends. For Chapman, this improvement came in the form of trying to earn extra money. She wanted a side hustle to put a few extra dollars in her back pocket every month, and it wouldn't be long until she found the perfect opportunity online. In October of 2020, she came across an online job advert that promised to be a part-time gig helping remote workers access US jobs. This recruiter role was absolutely perfect for Chapman. It allowed her to work her own hours remotely when she had the spare time and paid pretty well for a side gig. She immediately applied and was accepted with equal speed. Little known to Chapman, however, this one decision would change the trajectory of her life forever. You see, this job, while on the surface completely legitimate, was actually a front for something much more sinister. Chapman was initially under the impression that the role involved helping US citizens apply for remote IT jobs at US companies. Once hired, the employee would have their own laptop shipped to them so they could start work. But there was just one small problem. The laptop started to get shipped to Chapman's own address. You see, this side hustle was anything but an innocent way to make money, nor a program to match US employees with the right job vacancies. In reality, this scheme was a complex operation set up by several North Korean scammers designed to steal the identity of real US citizens. It was a pretty simple setup. Chapman and her North Korean associates would apply for jobs with these stolen IDs. The company would then employ this individual, who, in their eyes, was a legitimate US citizen, but in actuality was just Chapman in disguise. The company-issued laptop would then be shipped to Chapman's address, who would run the laptop from the US and help a North Korean associate remotely control the laptop to make it appear as if they were working from the US. The North Korean associates would then take the wages, which, according to US reports, were ultimately used to fund North Korea's nuclear weapons program. Naturally, it didn't take long for Chapman to figure out that she wasn't helping US citizens find a job and was actually fronting a completely illegal operation. But when you're swimming with sharks so dangerous, it's hard to get out of the water, and for months, Chapman became trapped in this scheme. She couldn't quit because of the pressure and threat posed by the Korean scammers she was assisting. Equally, she couldn't go to the authorities because she would basically be writing her own prison sentence. So, stuck between a rock and a hard place, she simply carried on, increasing her laptop farm and getting deeper and deeper into this unfortunate and illegal operation. The entire operation became so big, in fact, that Chapman hired 2 employees to help her run the farm. She would also file fake tax reports and returns to stop the IRS from drawing any suspicion. For the next 8 or so months, Chapman's scheme generated over $17.1 million in revenue from over 300 companies that were unknowingly conned. However, by the start of 2023, the end would start to creep before Chapman. An end that would ultimately bring our misbegotten protagonists some relief. Now, before we explain how Chapman's multi-million-dollar laptop farm was eventually uncovered, if you haven't already, please pound that subscribe button. It's completely free and it'll help prevent scammers from robbing you of your entire life savings. So please, do yourself a favour, subscribe, or be scared. Interestingly, there was not one catalyst that contributed to Chapman's unfortunate downfall. Rather, it was a series of ever-increasing clues that, over time, painted a very sinister picture. In 2023, for instance, a number of associated employment companies began noticing logins from unusual IP addresses. Next, a bank being used by Chapman flagged payroll deposits as inconsistent with the employment records. A few months later, an identity theft victim reported unauthorized tax activity. And, before long, the authorities began tracing multiple suspicious job applications to the same home address, Chapman's. These inconsistencies, though meaningless on their own, were difficult to ignore when analysed together. So, over the next few months, federal authorities began compiling this evidence, and in October of 2023, armed with sufficient evidence, the FBI officially raided Chapman's home, and what they found was nothing short of frightening. During their raid, the FBI seized no less than 90 laptops, as well as shipping labels for 35 individual packages to Dandong, China, a city on the border with North Korea. And it's safe to say that with this mountain of evidence in hand, Chapman stood no chance in court. Charged with wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, and money laundering conspiracy, Chapman would ultimately plead guilty to stealing the identities of 68 US citizens and helping foreign workers use those identities to gain employment at over 300 companies by using these identities. For her crimes, she was sentenced to 8.5 years in prison and ordered to hand over $284,000 in profits that were due to be paid to a North Korean associate. And, to be honest, it's hard not to feel at least some sympathy for Chapman. In hindsight, she probably could have handled the situation differently and gone to the authorities as soon as she realised what this scheme was actually endorsing. However, all she ever wanted was a side hustle to earn a few extra bucks every month, and for her efforts, she was handed a life-changing prison sentence. As of the time of making this video, Chapman is still behind bars and likely will be for a number of years before a review of her prison sentence is permitted. Ultimately, the story of Christina Chapman is a heartbreaking example of what can happen when a law-abiding and generally good person is met with the wrong circumstances at the wrong time. Yes, she knew what she was doing was wrong, but she was also in a desperate situation and was ultimately taken advantage of to bolster the bank balance of others. However, compared to the financial scam that Cheong Mi Lan carried out, one that involved the siphoning not of millions, but billions of dollars, Her crimes don't look all that bad. Check out the video that's popping up on your screen now, and I'll show you what I mean.